Hi everybody, welcome to our course on how to write high impact professional emails in English. This is the agenda of our course and the topics that we will be covering throughout the lesson. Since this is our first lesson, we will take the basic parts of our professional email and focus on some things you should do and some things you should avoid. By the end of this lesson, you will have a good understanding of how a basic English email is organized. The first thing I would like to think about is your current email. What does it look like? In other words, is this an email you can use when applying for a new job, or you can use when making an important business contact? You will notice my first and last name in the email. I recommend that you have one similar to this. You don't have to include your full name, but something that readers can easily verify as you. Now let's look a little bit at the four basics of an email and how to write them. These four are subject line, the greeting, the email text, and the closing. They may seem overly simple, but looking at each part and examining it closely is well worth the effort. We always write a subject line in our heading. This is the first we always do when writing an email. It should introduce the topic of the email and get readers' mind focus. Let's look at a couple of examples. In our first example, the topic is unclear. These show the reader exactly why are you emailing them. The subject line should be as clear and as specific as possible. Try to imagine that you are receiving an email. Which subject line has the clearest message? Now here's something I don't want you to do. Don't forget about the basics of writing in English, like spelling things correctly and getting your grammar, punctuation, and capitalization right. Paying attention to this starts even at the subject line. We will go over this in more detail later in the module. Now comes the greeting. Greetings should be formal and not too familiar. If you are certain about a few details of your reader, this makes things easier. Look for a person's position at the company, university, or office, if possible, and mention that in the meeting. For example, here you can see the example I wrote, Dear Professor Rakshanda. If gender is the only information you have about the reader, then Dear Sir or Dear Madam will work. In some situations, you may have to use to whom it may concern. For example, in the case of letter of recommendation for a student or addressing a company like PIA. Example for addressing a group includes their sales team or their students. Now let's turn to the email text, which is the third but largest part of your email because it includes the main message and all the necessary details. Here's another don't. You aren't writing a book here. Avoid long emails altogether. You want the reader to read all of your texts, so you should only include important information, essential details, but remain brief and to the point. If possible, keep the email text to 1 or 2 paragraphs, and no paragraph should be more than 3 to 4 sentences long. If you are asking your reader to do something for you, keep that to 1 or 2 requests. I, Another thing I want you to avoid is sounding like you are complaining or blaming your reader. This puts the reader on the defensive. It makes them less likely to do what you are asking of them. And here's something I always want you to do. Always add a word of thanks. If you make a request for information or asking somebody to do something for you, even if it's their job to do it, no busy person likes to feel like you don't appreciate their effort. The final part of an email is your closing. This is very short and simple. Just add best regards or and leave it to that. This is a professional email, so no more than that is needed. This is followed by the signature, your first and last name, and you can add any contact information your reader will need to communicate with you. They already have your email address, but if they need anything else, you can put it there. Finally, I would like to add a word of caution here. This is our last don't. Never address your email to your reader until you have written it and checked it over and over again. Considering that, considering all that we have been over in this lesson, it's too easy to hit the send button by accident before you have carefully considered how it will sound and read at the other end. Wait until the very last to add the email address. So let's review what we have learned in this lesson. First, there are 4 parts to a professional written email: the subject line, the greeting, the email text, and the closing. And here's our do's and don'ts. Do have a professional email. Do make your subject line very clear and brief. Do add words of appreciation. Now don't forget about spelling, grammar, punctuation, and capitalization. Don't write a book. Obviously, avoid long emails. Email texts should be limited to 1 or 2 paragraphs and 2 requests. Don't complain or blame. Don't address the email until it is written and checked carefully for all the things we have learned in this lesson. I hope you enjoyed the first lesson and feel confident to write your first email in this course. Try and apply as many of the do's and don'ts we have covered here. Now that you have the basic elements of an email, I want to focus on how to be sure that the information you include is brief and clear, that way the reader can understand and respond if necessary. Here's the code that can keep us focused on how to write better emails. It's by Louis Brooks and it says, writing is 1% inspiration and 11% elimination. The best way to write and remain brief is to stick to your own words and your own message. Be sure you say only what is needed. When you use unnecessary words, you mess up the message. It looks awkward and cluttered. When you write an email, sometimes leaving out the extra words is as important as the words you choose to leave in. Let's look at an example. The first sentence, which says, "We often add adjective and adverbs and filter words which are not necessary." Let me say that again with the second sentence, at this time with more words. Very often when we write, we put lots of extra words like adjectives and adverbs, which, when you really think about it, are very much unnecessary. Both sentences have the same message, but the first had less than half the words. This is how you make a message brief and clear. Along the theme of the first lesson, here's a do and a don't. Don't use the passive voice. Do focus on precision. Not passive, rather precise. Let's look at an example. The first example says, "Powerful emails are written by people." And the second one is, "People write powerful emails." Which one sounds more precise? The second one is the active voice and is always clearer. In English, there are two ways to express many thoughts, the active and the passive. When the verb is active, the subject performs the action, and when the verb is passive, the subject receives the action. Here are some other examples. Ashfaq drove me to university today, or I was driven to university by Ashfaq today. Which is the active here? Again, the first one. That's why it was more clear. Now let's here's a small quiz question for you. Take a minute or two and try to answer this by yourself. Well, the correct answer is the last one. Now let's focus on clarity. Your goal here is to be clear. When you write, make sure you are keeping things in order. When announcing a meeting or an event, for instance, you will begin with the name of the event. This will be followed by when and for how long the event will last. Finally, exactly where is the event happening. This can be included in the name of the event. The key here is to be precise with the most important information. After you write the email, sit back and look at it carefully. Imagine that you are getting the same email. Will it give you all the needed information? Is it easy to understand? Ask yourselves these questions. Now I would like you to take a break and write an email on your own for you to practice. Here is the scenario I am giving to you. Suppose you are in the HR department of an MNC in Karachi. Your task is to invite employee staff at an event to celebrate Women's Day at your office. Consider the guidelines I give you so far in the course. Now let's turn to some of the more common capitalization and punctuation errors in English. It is important to understand the rules when you are writing in English. As for punctuation, I want to focus on 6 errors that are most common and easy to see quickly. These 6 are the apostrophe, the exclamation mark, commas, the semicolon, quotation marks, and finally emoticons or text symbols. Before we go into the details of each of these, let's quickly test your knowledge. Choose all the answers that have correct punctuation. Take a minute or two and think about the correct answer. Well, these are the correct options you should have selected. Let's get into the details of the punctuation. First, the apostrophe, it is used for possession, like Osama's laptop, Yahya's car. If you use it in a contraction like can't or wouldn't, you should not put in your email. You should not put it in your email. Second, the exclamation point is one of the most overused simple symbols in punctuation. Frankly speaking, it should be avoided in professional emails, but if you do happen to use it, don't use it more than once or twice. Third is the commas. The best rule for these is to read your email aloud. For example, in this case, the example which I have mentioned, it says, "Hey Rabia, for our meeting later today, comma, I will bring the required documents. If you have time, comma, could you please pick Vanya on your way? Thanks, comma, Visma." If you pause, there is the place where a comma should go. Also use commas with lists such as for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. When you use these words to connect two sentences such as the one on the slide. Next is the list where you should need to use commas. For examples, in this example, bottles, comma, cups, comma, plates, comma, spoons. I had to put a comma on between all of them because they are a series or a list of things. You also use commas to set off all geographical names like Peshawar, comma, Pakistan, or Toronto, comma, Canada. Next is the use of semicolon. Use a semicolon to join parts of a series when some items in the series already include commas. For example, here you can see I have written the sentence recent Olympic site includes. I forgot to mention the word include. There should be the word include. Athens, comma, Greece, semicolon, Beijing, China, Beijing, comma, China, semicolon, and London, comma, UK. Fifth errors that we make in punctuation is the use of quotation marks. These are not to be used for emphasis, like in this example, where I have written that I would really like to show my thesis. So here it should not be used like this. They are only supposed to be used when you are telling your reader exactly what someone said. Take a look at this example. He said, "I would really like to show you my thesis." This is the correct usage of quotation marks. Finally, do not use emoticons like you do in a text message. Do not mix up the writing styles. Here's another example. Yeah. So as you can see, these three emoticons I have shown in the slides as examples. This should be avoided in the emails. There is one punctuation item I did not mention because I thought it might be too easy for you, and it's the period. You can see I have deliberately uh, made it bold at the end of the sentence to show you this is an example. So don't forget to add it at the end of every sentence unless it's a question. So I hope that you learned a lot from this course, and from now onwards you will be able to write better emails. Uh, and I hope to see you in the next course I design on Udemy. Thank you.